Greetings and peace. I would like to start this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours. Today's presentation, I would like to talk about the Masonic to occult pipeline and how Freemasonry is actually used, especially the Lodge, Grand Lodge system, right? It's used as a recruiting pool for other orders or other occult and esoteric orders that are out there. They use Freemasonry as the screening process. Just like how you have marijuana being a gateway drug, right? Freemasonry is that gateway to the other paths that are out there, since most of this organization is infiltrated and compromised anyway by people who shouldn't be there. And it's basically, many people talk about the school to prison pipeline, right? Where certain elements for certain people are set up. But in this case, we're talking about the Masonic element. And my field experience since 2016, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm somebody who's been inside the system, have experienced Masonry regular, recognized in more than one country and jurisdiction. So I've been around the block. I know what I'm talking about. And this is not something that, an outsider can assume, right? So I hope you enjoy this, and I represent myself only. So we're dealing with the occult pipeline, where modern Freemasonry is being used as a recruiting pool for other occult orders. Now, keep in mind, in terms of the esoteric and spiritual teachings of Masonry, it's beautiful, and I continue to teach that, right? But the organization itself, the physical organization, the Lodge, Grand Lodge system, is infiltrated and compromised by people who have no business being there and who actually go against spiritual Masonic teachings and what the order truly represents, right? Being a brotherhood of light and all of that in between. So, you could be sitting in lodge with somebody that belongs to other orders, and that force of the egregor that affects you, that does bring misfortune upon your life. So all these egregors that are conflicting with the Masonic egregor at the same time, you have like a very dangerous combination that's taking place. Why does this response exist? Welcome. This presentation is produced for free speech, commentary, education, and entertainment purposes only. It reflects my personal experiences, opinions, interpretations, and publicly discussed historical material. It is not intended to defame any individual, nor any private individuals are named, but to shine a critical light on hidden structures. This presentation responds directly to the repeated racist gaslighting, dismissal, and deflection I have encountered when raising legitimate concerns about Freemasonry. It documents a personal journey that many former members quietly acknowledge, but rarely articulate publicly due to severe social pressure, fear of ostracism, or reputational retaliation. But see, with somebody like me, if you look at the lesson of the Entered Apprentice degree, trust God and do not fear any danger. So when you walk with God, you don't fear any danger, and you always stand up for the truth, right? So I'm using that same example here. And with my experience, you have most Masons here in America, they join their city lodges or small town lodges, and they never experience the aspect of Masonry outside of that reality. So for somebody like me who's been in more than one country and jurisdiction, and what I've seen on like all sides of the fence, that repeated patterns that I'm recognizing and I have exposed, this is what I'm showing here. Expectations versus reality. Freemasonry is presented publicly to the masses as an honorable bastion of brotherhood, charity, moral improvement, and unity across race and religion, right? An organization claiming morality. These noble ideals are incredibly attractive. They resonate deeply with sincere, good-hearted seekers who are genuinely looking for fellowship and self-betterment. However, the lived experience often diverges sharply from this polished public relations image. Behind the closed doors of the lodge, one frequently discovers rigid political hierarchies, blatant favoritism, racial bias, and a highly transactional culture. Loyalty is vehemently demanded, but it is rarely reciprocated in times of genuine need. So they want your loyalty, but in your time of need, they're nowhere to be found. The occult pipeline. In its beginning stages, Freemasonry is intentionally shown to be nice, innocent, and focused on community service. Even Albert Pike says in his writings, right, that the beginning stages shown to the initiate, he's being deceived on purpose. It acts as an effective filter in a broad net to bring in good men. But the higher you ascend through the degrees, those other darker doors begin to open for you. Most high positions within these structures are occupied by individuals whose true allegiances lie far beyond standard Freemasonry. They form exclusive inner rings, their cliques, helping their occult buddies get ahead in society, business, and politics. I am someone who has been inside this system, so this is not a conspiracy theory, it is a first-hand testimony. And most of these occult organizations, they basically use Freemasonry as a recruiting pool. So depending on you as a person, what kind of knowledge you're seeking, and in terms of who you're surrounding yourself with, and that basically determines the next level. There are those that will stay at Blue Lodge for the rest of their lives, right? They will just, go do their degrees, go through the chairs, and they don't go beyond that. And if, let's say, the ones that are checking you out, they're breadcrumbing you with certain information and knowledge, and you respond positively to that, then, that one thing kind of leads to the other. So it depends on who you are as a person as well. Allegiances beyond the lodge. First, the inner circles. Like many hierarchical societies, Freemasonry operates with inner circles that control resources, advancement, and recognition. The public face masks a hidden executive core. 2. The mushroom management. Lower ranks are frequently kept completely in the dark, fed selective narratives, and expected to sustain the system financially without any real transparency. So it's not about having good qualified men in the organization. I mean, nowadays you got the one-day classes where you could become a Master Mason, 32nd degree Scottish Rite, Shriner, all of that in one day. So it's about keeping the organization sustained financially and not about actual true growth where it's nothing but business meetings. But I think all of that is designed on purpose. So the third being politics over merit. Advancement depends heavily on unquestioning allegiance, networking, and silence rather than actual moral character. True spiritual development is utterly secondary. It's like even with Scottish Rite, you have those that have or get selected for the 33rd, and they tell you that it's an honorary degree based on lifetime achievement or moral character, but it's about who you know, your financial background, your professional background, whether you're law enforcement, you're in politics, finance, you're a lawyer, etc., or you're connected with the higher-ups and your allegiances are beyond Masonry as well. So it's all like that. It's like even with the Shriners, right? They're projecting to be a good philanthropic organization, helping children and all of that, right, with the hospitals. But you have the Jesters, right? Nobody ever dare mentions them. They are a sub-branch of the Shriners, and all of the degeneracy happens with them while they're wearing the Islamic fez. So even in Surah 5 of the Holy Quran, God tells us, do not take for friends who make your religion into a sport. George Washington's warning. George Washington wrote a letter to Reverend Snyder in 1798. A part of that letter is listed as follows, where Washington says, I did not believe that the lodges of Freemasons in this country had, as societies, endeavored to propagate the diabolical tenets. That individuals of them may have done it is too evident to be questioned. So at that time, the English of the 1700s was very formal. So if I translate this into the modern language of English, he was basically saying that the lodges are infiltrated and compromised, right, at that time. Adding on, what George Washington was fearing was the fear of infiltration. Washington, famously a Freemason himself, wrote letters in 1798 explicitly stating his fear that the fraternity was being infiltrated and compromised by outside forces. Specifically, he was responding to warnings about the Illuminati and radical Jacobinism. Now, most people say, okay, yeah, these organizations don't exist anymore. So I think a lot of these organizations still exist today. The Knights Templars, Illuminati, Hashashin, but they are just hiding under other groups, right? They're still around. It's still the same people fighting against the same people, as we see even with the never-ending Middle Eastern conflicts. So it's those occult wars and agendas are always there since day one. Nothing truly went away. Now, he would say about it that they were secretly co-opting the infrastructure of the lodges, right? He recognized that while the lodges themselves might not have been founded to be entirely corrupted, elite individuals were absolutely using them as a vehicle for hidden agendas, right? And basically compromising the infrastructure of the lodge. Washington himself admitted he had rarely attended a lodge in his final 30 years. He was distancing himself from the evolving institution. Just like how you have many Masons who, like, once they pierce through the veil, what they do is either they get quiet, they'll quietly just pay their dues and not attend anything, right, just to maintain that protection over them. Or what they do is, which is the right thing to do, is to resign honorably and in good standing before they try to, get you in any kind of trouble, any situation where you end up, in prison or end up being killed, or anything where it's expulsion or suspension where the egregor continues to intensify in your life. So the only two options that are there are either you quietly just go quiet and just continue to pay your dues and live your day-to-day life, or you just leave honorably and move on that way as well. So the second option is much better. Going against the grain, what happens to those who challenge the system? You have the case of William Morgan. What happens when someone goes against the grain? History provides a chilling example with William Morgan in 1826. Morgan, a resident of Batavia, New York, became disillusioned with the fraternity and publicly announced his intention to publish a book exposing its secret rituals and inner workings. Shortly after his announcement, Morgan was arrested on bogus charges, abducted from his jail cell by a group of identified Masons, and was never seen again. His disappearance sparked outrage across the nation, leading to the formation of the anti-Masonic Party. The system protects itself ruthlessly. Racism and exclusion. The universalist illusion. Despite the universalist rhetoric, systematic bias exists. When racism is addressed, it is often dismissed as a mere misunderstanding rather than recognized as a structural flaw. So even if you are a good dues-paying member, you're doing everything by the books, and let's say you see anything that should not be going on and you report it, they don't do anything about it. They try to sweep everything under the rug. Protecting the ego. This gaslighting invalidates lived experiences and protects the institutional ego while systematically silencing those who courageously challenge the dominant narrative. The Prince Hall origins. Prince Hall Freemasonry emerged specifically due to blatant exclusion, segregation, and the refusal of recognition by white Grand Lodges for generations. But the way that I see them now is like just Uncle Ruckus, right? Begging for acceptance and inclusion by the mainstream recognition system that's there. So whether you're looking at the white side or the black side, they're both protecting the system as we know it today. Maybe back then there was some difference, right? There actually was some actual work being done, but in modern society, no. They're all just looking after their own and looking after each other and protecting the system as a whole. KKK and the Southern Lodges. Historically, there are deeply documented overlaps between members of the Ku Klux Klan and Southern Masonic lodges, particularly in early 20th century America. The KKK's rule book, the Quran, right, bastardizing the Quran, itself borrowed fraternal structures, rituals, titles, and secrecy models directly from Masonic organizations. You can even look at specific regional instances, such as the existence of a Confederate degree in Mississippi, where they recently denied recognizing Prince Hall. This highlights a dark reality. The institution has historically harbored and institutionalized racism, completely contradicting its public, outward-facing claims of universal brotherhood and being charitable and all that. The psychological binding. Let's discuss the rituals and initiations. Initiatory oaths function not only as symbolic commitments, but as profound psychological and spiritual binding mechanisms. They are reinforced through physical repetition, enforced secrecy, and intense social pressure from the group to comply. Words are spells. They shape identity and perception, especially in the oath when you're saying, binding myself. When combined with ritual authority and the sensory deprivation of the initiation process, they bind individuals to collective entities, the egregor. Understanding whom these ceremonies ultimately serve often leads sincere seekers to finally awaken and disengage. Like, what is all of that about at the end of the day, And the thing is that what I see in the future, the ancient Freemasonry of the East, right, before the whole 1717 Grand Lodge formalization of the West, I believe in the future, in the 2030s, the whole Grand Lodge system is going to dissolve, and people are just going to take like the spiritual teachings in their own independent journeys in the post-2030 world. Like the system that we're dealing with now, it's changing with AI, with the younger generation who's not going to tolerate any of this. So time is something that will answer a lot of our questions, and we will see it in our lifetimes. Concept of the egregor. In esoteric terms, an egregor refers to a collective psychic construct sustained by shared belief, ritual, and emotional investment. Whether viewed spiritually or purely psychologically, its effects are widely reported by former members who feel tethered to the organization long after they stop attending. So even after resigning in good standing, I had to do a lot of spiritual work to get this energy out of my life. Many report strange phenomena while active, unexplained declines in health, finances, family stability, and mental clarity. Intriguingly, these same individuals often report a noticeable and rapid improvement in their lives after an honorable departure and a conscious spiritual disentanglement. So you got to resign in good standing. You got to resign the same way that you came in. You came in honorably, well recommended, good report, all that. And you got to leave the same way. Because if there's anything involving suspension, expulsion, or like, let's say there are certain forces that try to get you in trouble or try to get you hurt, then that kind of messes things up for you. So you got to leave honorably. You got to listen to your sixth sense and know when to walk away. So that's exactly what it is. Another thing I wanted to add about the egregor is how, like, basically when you're sitting in a lodge with, let's say you're already dealing with the Masonic egregor to begin with, but let's say you're sitting in lodge or appendant bodies or other organizations and meetings within Masonry who belong to other systems, they're carrying their egregors into the lodge as well. So not only you're dealing with the Masonic egregor, you might be dealing with somebody who's OTO, Rosicrucian, Golden Dawn, other orders and occultism that they might be involved with that will be affecting you and your family. So you got to keep that in mind. The higher-ups you always see, right, that's suddenly their spouse passed away or they opened up a charity in their spouse's name. It's always something weird going on, right? Somebody passes away in their family and their health is declining. Something happens to them all of a sudden. So it's a lot of like supernatural phenomena as well that, my lived experience has witnessed. Even if you look at the video game Harvester, the point-and-click adventure game from 1996, it kind of points out to the same aspect as well. Where Steve Mason, right, he had to ascend through the lodge and at the end he had to sacrifice his spouse in order to like get ahead. So, yep. Escaping the system. 1. Honorable exit. Resigning in good standing is essential to disengage. Suspension or expulsion intensifies stress and reputational damage, reinforcing dependency and fear. See, that's why with me and the work that I do, I got them right by the balls, because they cannot talk about me or dare mention me, that I was suspended or expelled. I left honorably, and I got my paperwork to prove it. The right sequence. You must resign from all appendant bodies before resigning from your Blue Lodge. So your Blue Lodge is the main foundation. So first you resign step by step from the appendant bodies or in the side houses. Once you get all of that done, then the final resignation should be the Blue Lodge. Because if you resign Blue Lodge first, that automatically suspends you from everything else. So you got to do it the right way. Now, failing this traps you in a deliberate bureaucratic limbo. Now, this is the fun part, right? The cult-like tactics. When members express intent to leave, officers and the lodge members frequently become evasive, delaying paperwork, requiring escalation to force compliance with bylaws. So if your dues are paid, you're not involved in any trial or charges, the bylaws of the Masonic system owe you that demit in good standing. And they start acting weird and cult-like, right, at the end when you try to, leave, because leaving hurts the egregor. That's the problem. When members join or are doing the rituals or attending meetings, that strengthens the collective egregor. But members who leave, it actually hurts and drains the life force of the egregor. That's why they all start acting like that. And another thing about the egregor is that it's like the all-seeing eye that's always watching you. So even if you're not talking to anybody, that egregor will record all intimate and private details of your life. So basically, the rest of the people in the hive mind have dirt on you. And, basically that's the concept of blackmail. They know everything, a single thing about you. So it's a transactional brotherhood. Basically, you're paying for friends. As long as your dues are paid and everything is good, right, you're included in everything, and you're basically paying a subscription fee once a year for friendship. Now, active members often experience intense social engagement, validation, and visibility. You are flooded with social media likes, messages, invitations, and public praise. It feels like a true family that has your back through thick and thin. However, upon departure, this so-called brotherhood vanishes almost instantly. So even if you resign in good standing, they all disappear overnight. No messages, no likes, no nothing. It's like they were never there. This rapid isolation reveals a highly transactional dynamic where fraternity is strictly contingent upon your continuous payment of dues, your physical attendance, and your utility to the hierarchy. So, yep, that's basically it. And I think an organization where you got to pay to have friends, or you got to tiptoe around, you got to be careful what you say, what you do, right? I mean, those are not your people to begin with. In my personal testimony and opinion, you can still be an upright, good, charitable human being without having to join anything. You can still be a good man. You can be charitable, honorable. You can contribute locally to your charities. Do all of that. Believe in God, right? But true spirituality and character are forged in the heart, not in a secret lodge. And that's what they tell you, right? What is the first place that you're made a Mason? It's in your heart. So that's what matters most. Beyond the lodge, moving towards true spiritual independence. Spiritual independence. There are elements of true spirituality and philosophical enlightenment buried within Masonic teachings, but the overarching Grand Lodge system itself is thoroughly corrupt. The pursuit of truth, enlightenment, and charity should not require submission to a political and esoteric machine. This material represents a final chapter addressing Freemasonry, and it marks a deliberate transition away from institutional critique and towards true spiritual independence, unwavering faith, and personal responsibility before God. So, even with the videos that I continue to do, I always put the disclaimer that it's not to encourage you to join, but just take the spiritual and esoteric teachings and apply them to your life. That's the best thing you could do. For those that are doing the resignation in good standing, first resign from the appendant bodies, the side houses and orders, and then the Blue Lodge finally. And if they do give you trouble, always go to the higher ups. So if it's Blue Lodge, go to your district deputy, right? If they're not complying with you. If it's Scottish Rite, call the membership services on the back of your card, right? The Supreme Council, and force your valley to cooperate. Same thing with the Royal Arch, go to the Grand High Secretary and or the High Priest Secretary and all of those people in those positions. So basically, whoever the superiors are, above the lodge or organization you're dealing with, if the bottom level ones are not complying with you, because they do start acting weird, because you leaving hurts the egregor. And also, if you're a part of it, be mindful that those around you might be part of occult organizations, and their egregors are affecting you and your family. And once you leave, things start getting better for you. And a lot of them, their goal is to basically find it's a screening process, right? They're basically recruiting for these other orders. And people in the higher ups or 33rds or whatever, or those that are in invitational only bodies, or they're esoteric cons or Masonic cons, you're always going to see the same familiar faces, the gatekeepers. And they're all in on it together, in these organizations beyond Masonry. For those that have true light and knowledge to share, look what I did, right? I didn't wait for anyone to give me permission. I made my own books, made my own videos and lectures, made a name for myself, right? So you are given the tools, and if nobody's validating you or acknowledging you, right? It's like me, I'm not a white Mason, so I'm sure my experience is vastly different. I was a little bit too brown for them, no matter how good I was. But and the reality is that you got to carve out your own path and teach others. So continue to teach and uplift others, and that's the best thing you could do, so they can avoid this Masonic to occult pipeline. So here we see the process, right? The entry point of Masonry, where step one is you attract the seeker through brotherhood, charity, moral teachings, personal growth, symbolic tradition. The second is you build loyalty and conditioning through the ritual and symbolism, secrecy, hierarchy, oaths and allegiance, group identity, and flooding them with inclusion, likes, messages to make them feel good and look good. And once the Blue Lodge graduation happens, it prepares the mind for deeper truths, esoteric curiosity, trust in the system, acceptance of hidden knowledge, desire for more illumination. And that kind of leads you, one thing to the other, where a lot of the wolves in sheep's clothing are waiting. So it's like even with many intelligence agencies, right? They find out the officers early in their careers who don't have a conscience or who have a psychopathic personality. They might make it all the way to director or super high positions. But those with a conscience, right? They become whistleblowers and they get out and they warn others not to fall into those traps. So, we even see that with many CIA officers, right? Without mentioning anyone's name. But, that's how it is sometimes. And I'm just doing my job here of making sure that I save others as well. So you don't have to join anything like this. Still continue to be a good person, upright, charitable, believe in God and all that, but without having to bind yourself to anything. A final statement is that my intention is not vengeance or hostility, but absolute clarity, closure, and the liberation of self and others from systems that no longer align with truth, integrity, or lived reality. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. If any questions or comments, please email me at salmansheikh911@gmail.com. Of course, all my work is protected under the copyright laws of fair use for free speech, education, entertainment, and nonprofit purposes. Thank you so much. All rights reserved.